I studied over 1,000 retirees. Here is what they all did to retire early. These are the habits that show up in every serious study of people who actually pulled off early retirement. Before going any further, I want to be straight with you because what follows pulls from real research, including the Ramsey National Study of Millionaires that surveyed 10,000 people. Thomas Stanley's Millionaire, Next Door Work. Tom Corley's 5-Year Rich Habits Study, and the latest 2024 EBRI Retirement Confidence Survey. If you are in your late 40s, 50s, or early 60s right now, staring down a pension that suddenly doesn't feel like enough, a guru isn't what you need. You need the patterns, so let's get into them. Here is something that probably catches most people off guard. According to the 2024 EBRI Retirement Confidence Survey, the median retirement age in America already sits at 62, and roughly 7 out of 10 retirees leave the workforce before 65. Early retirement isn't some rare unicorn outcome, but the catch is that about 40% of retirees admit they retired earlier than planned, usually because of health problems, a layoff, or having to care for a family member. CNBC reported in November of 2024, citing Transamerica research, that 58% of workers retire earlier than they expected. You will probably retire early. Statistically speaking, the real question is whether it happens on your terms or on life's terms, and that is where the people who pulled it off voluntarily start to look different from everyone else. The first pattern is almost boring in how consistent it appears. Early retirees saved aggressively, and they started young. Vanguard, How America Saves 2025 report puts the average 401k contribution rate in 2024 at 12%, with a median of 11.5%. And that is the normal American. People who retire early on purpose save far more than that, with the FIRE movement, short for Financial Independence Retire Early, generally aiming for a 50 to 75% savings rate, according to NerdWallet's reporting. Transamerica's research on future early retirees pinned the median starting age at 25, not 35, not 45, 25. If you are watching this in your 50s, thinking that ship has sailed, stay with me, because the next habit matters even more at your age. Pattern number 2 is that they invested consistently in boring vehicles for a long time. The Ramsey National Study of Millionaires, which surveyed 10,000 American millionaires between November of 2017 and January of 2018, found that 8 out of 10 built their wealth through their company 401k, and 3 out of 4 also invested outside of that. When asked what got them to millionaire status, 75% pointed to regular, consistent investing over a long stretch of time. Here is the part nobody on TikTok wants to hear, which is that not a single millionaire in that study credited single stock picking as a major factor in their success. Not one. No meme stocks. No crypto moonshots, no story about the one trade that changed everything. Just steady contributions, compounding for decades. The third pattern is the one Thomas Stanley built his entire career on, going back to the Millionaire Next Door in 1996. And it is that early retirees lived below their means, visibly, almost stubbornly. In the Ramsey study, 94% of millionaires reported living on less than they earn, and nearly 3 out of 4 have never carried a credit card balance in their lives. Restaurant spending came in at $200 or less a month for most of them. Coupons get used by 93%, and grocery shopping happens with a written list for 85%. These are people with 7 figures in the bank, still clipping coupons. Stanley's research called this the difference between a prodigious accumulator of wealth and an under-accumulator of wealth, where 2 people can earn the exact same income for 30 years, and one retires comfortably at 58, while the other is still grinding at 68. The paycheck isn't the variable. What happens to the paycheck after it lands in the account is the next pattern might sting a little. They didn't actually earn that much. Only 31% of the millionaires in the Ramsey study ever averaged a 6-figure salary across their career, and 1/3 never cleared 6 figures in a single working year, ever. As for senior leadership roles like VP or C-suite, just 15% held those. The top 5 careers among American millionaires turned out to be engineer, accountant, teacher, management, and attorney. And yes, teacher made the list. 93% of them credited hard work, not a fat salary, for getting them wealthy. 79% received 0 inheritance, and only 3% inherited $1 million or more. If you've been sitting there convinced you missed your shot because executive money was never in the cards, the data says the opposite. The executive path was never the main road. Pattern number 5 is more recent, and this is where the modern FIRE movement enters the picture. They knew their number. The whole framework traces back to a 1992 book called Your Money or Your Life by Vicky Robin and Joe Dominguez, which moved over 1 million copies and built the philosophical foundation for everything that came after. In 1994, a financial advisor named William Bengen published research in the Journal of Financial Planning showing that a 4.15% withdrawal rate had historically survived any 30-year retirement window, and the Trinity study in 1998 backed him up. That became the famous 4% rule. And from there, the math gets simple, because you multiply your annual expenses by 25, and that is roughly your number. Pete Adeny, the guy behind the Mr. Money Mustache blog, used exactly that math to retire as a software engineer at age 30 in 2005, when his son was born. Here is a fresh update worth knowing, which is that in late 2024, Bengen himself publicly revised his safe withdrawal guidance closer to 4.2%, even for retirements stretching 50 to 60 years. Fidelity runs more conservative on this. For retirement before age 62, their guideline calls for saving 33 times your annual expenses, assuming a 3% withdrawal rate. Depending on whose math you trust, your target lands somewhere between 25 and 33 times what you spend in a year. The point is that every single person who retired early on purpose knew their number, and the people still guessing at 67 are the ones who never figured theirs out. The 6th pattern comes from Tom Corley's Rich Habits research, where he spent 5 years studying 233 wealthy people with an average net worth of $4.3 million. Corley found they shared a cluster of daily habits, including reading for self-education, exercising regularly, networking on purpose, limiting TV, and almost always running more than one stream of income when CNBC interviewed him. Corley described the most reliable wealth-building path he found, and it wasn't entrepreneurship or investing genius, but what he called the saver investor path. Save a chunk, invest the chunk, repeat for 20 to 30 years. That is the entire playbook. The last pattern, which Transamerica's 24th Annual Retirement Survey called out directly, is that 71% of future early retirees had a written retirement strategy, not a vague idea, not a feeling, an actual plan. They knew what they were spending, what they were saving, what they were invested in, and when they expected to stop working. Let me bring this back to where we started, because a lot of you watching are 45 to 65. You've got a pension on the line, and you're wondering if any of this still applies. Here is the honest answer from the research. The people who retired early didn't have one secret. They had a stack of unglamorous habits running in parallel for decades. They saved more than average. They invested in index funds and 401k SINs. Instead of chasing hot stocks, they didn't look rich. They didn't earn extraordinary money. They knew their number. They ran multiple income streams, and they kept an actual written plan. None of that requires being 25 again. The Ramsey data shows those millionaires hit the mark well into adulthood, and Stanley's research focused on dentists, engineers, and small business owners in their 50s and 60s who had quietly outsaved everyone around them. One more thing worth saying, because the research is honest about it. Every one of these studies carries survivorship bias baked right in, which means we're hearing from the people who made it, not from the people who tried the same playbook and got hit by a medical emergency, a divorce, or a 2008-style market crash at exactly the wrong moment. If early retirement is your goal, plan for the upside, but don't plan as if nothing can go wrong. Remember that 40% figure from EBRI, because nearly half of retirees leave work earlier than planned, and not in a good way. The patterns are real, repeatable, and confirmed by decades of independent research from Stanley, Ramsey, Corley, Benjamin, EBRI, Vanguard, and Fidelity. People who retired early on purpose did the same handful of things over and over for a long stretch of time. That is the whole secret. There isn't a second one.